Hi, I'm Dave Epstein. Welcome to this edition of Growing Wisdom. Today I'm talking about pruning roses late winter and early spring. This is the time of year I tend to prune my roses. Now, we've had a very mild winter. It's only the last week of February and I'm already doing this. I used to prune them in late December before the snow came when they were hardened off, but what I discovered is they had a little bit of damage from the winter, so I tend to wait until late winter, early spring to do this. If I see that it's going to be excessively cold in the week or two ahead, then I hold off, but right now it doesn't look like we have any extreme cold on the way, so I've begun to prune my roses. Now, one of the things you want to do is be sure you understand what type of rose you have. So most of mine are flower carpet or knockout roses. They tend to be very hardy, very forgiving depending on how much you prune or don't prune, and they tend to flower multiple times throughout the season. If you have a climbing rose or perhaps tea roses or some of the more specialty roses, you want to check to see how much of those you're supposed to prune. But again, this is really the time of year for those of us in zones 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 7. You should be pruning late winter into early spring. Now, exactly where you live will determine whether or not you're pruning or not. But again, southern New England, I'm pruning late February into mid-March. So one of the key things with pruning roses is that you want to make sure you have great sharp scissors, clean, angular cuts, and you want to look for the growth node, and you're pruning about 1/4 to 1/2 inch above the growth node, and you want to do that around your plant. And I generally bring most of mine, and remember what type I have, I bring them down to about 1.5 to 2 feet tall, so I get off all that excess growth, and then I just chip that up, and that actually goes into the mulch pile, and I'll be using it somewhere else. Let's take a look. Here's a massive rose bush. This grew a ton last year, and you can already begin to see the first nodes of growth starting to come out. And so what I'll do is I will cut above a growth node depending on how high I want to have the rose bush. Now generally I'll bring this down quite a bit. You can see some of my cuts from last year. If you look fairly closely right down in there, there's a cut from last year, and so you had right in there, you had all that growth right there. And so these grow a lot. I fertilize them and they get adequate water and they do pretty well during the course of the summer, but it's time to prune. The best thing to do is locate where you have some growth, which is right there. See that little growth bud? And then just make a nice sharp cut at an angle just above it. And you can discard this carefully. You do want to be super careful with the thorns. You can get a bacteria from the rose thorns inside your hands. I've done it and I've had to go on antibiotics, so you want to be real careful. I use a very thick pair of gloves, not when I'm filming, but while I'm doing this. So again, look for these little growth nodes like this, and just at an angle, make a nice cut like that. And you can see here where that growth is going to be right there. So there's your new growth for next year, or this year I should say. And you can also cut out any dead wood as well. If you're wondering what I feed, I do use Rose Tone. It's a great product. I like using it, and I just follow the directions. You can see all these roses here. They've all been fed, and some more back there. They all have their 1.25 cups, and I'll feed them again, mid-spring, but this will get them going. When I apply fertilizer, I like to clear away as much of the mulch, get down to that bare soil, and then I just sprinkle this in the front and the back around the drip line. And what I'll do is I'll just work it in. You can use a tool if you want. I like doing it with my hands. Put some mulch back. Whether you do clean mulch, I like to do clean mulch generally, and that's it. So hopefully this is helpful. I think the keys are that I'm fertilizing my roses right after pruning. I'm putting down fresh mulch around them. I'm making sure that fertilizer is worked in, and I'm doing it really early. I have found over time in my experience that doing this sooner than later with getting that fertilizer down really helps those roses to get off to a great growth once they do start growing later on in April and into May. And the blooms are absolutely spectacular late May and early June. For Growing Wisdom, I'm Dave Epstein.